Broadcasting live from the Business RadioX studios, it's time for Women in Motion. Brought to you by WBEC West. Join forces, succeed together. Now, here's your host.
Lee Kantor here, another episode of Women in Motion, and this is going to be a good one. But before we get started, it's important to recognize our sponsor, WBEC West. Without them, we couldn't be sharing these important stories. Today on Women in Motion, we have Franchesca Van Buren with Insight Therapy Solutions. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the invite. It's nice to be here today.
Well, I'm so excited to learn what you're up to. For folks who aren't familiar, can you share a little bit about Insight Therapy Solutions? How are you serving folks?
Yeah, definitely. So Insight Therapy Solutions is a national talk therapy clinic. We are all telehealth and we accept insurance. So basically counseling.
Now, what is talk therapy for folks who aren't familiar?
So it's counseling. So basically, like if you have, depression, anxiety, anger management, family issues, it's counseling for that. So I say talk therapy because there's lots of different types of counseling. There's religious counseling, there is, school counseling, things like that. So that's why I say talk therapy, because it's basically therapy that you talk about, like you talk about and get therapy,
So can you explain it between like a life coach and a therapist? How kind of would the work be different from a patient perspective?
Oh, it's very different. So therapy is a medical model. So therapists have to go to school. They generally have a master's or a PhD, and then they are licensed through their state as therapists. A life coach, there's a lot of programs out there that can be a week long. It's not, there's no real degree for life coaching. So life coaching is really more, I would say, like a motivational kind of thing. You might get life coaching to help you figure out, maybe you want to change your career, or maybe you want help figuring out how do you reach your weight loss goals, things like that. Whereas therapy is really much more, generally there's a diagnosis and you have an actual treatment plan, and it might last 5 weeks, it might last 6 months, it might last years. But really, therapy is very, very different from life coaching. It's not the same thing at all.
Now, what would be some of the things that a person's going through where therapy is the right path to go to solve their problem? Well,
therapy is such a good thing for so many different things. You think about some people have things like chronic issues, like they may have chronic depression, or they may have chronic anxiety where, their entire life they've struggled with a mental health issue. And of course, therapy is very important for that. But you may also have a certain life issue that's happening, such as maybe you're going through a divorce, or maybe you just lost your job, or maybe you lost a parent or even a child. Or maybe you got a life-altering diagnosis, like maybe you've been told that you have cancer, and that plunges you into depression and anxiety and that kind of thing. And so even if you never experienced a mental health issue before, all of a sudden, you may need a professional to come in and help guide you through that. And, one of the things that I think brought the whole world to a better understanding of mental health issues is COVID. COVID happened recently, and that was such a terrible life event for all of us. I've talked to many people about, how COVID made them feel. And all of a sudden, all over the world, people now understood depression. They now understood anxiety, because people who had never felt that before, because COVID was such a huge life-altering thing, all of a sudden they got it. They couldn't leave their homes. They were worried about their health. They were worried about their families. I mean, that was such an incredible event that we all went through, where we understood. I think most people understood what mental health issues were at that point. So, I would say those are the types of things that you might want to reach out to a therapist for. Basically, anything that you're feeling lost, you're feeling confused, you feel like maybe your daily life functions are no longer the way that they were. Maybe you don't have motivation to get out of bed anymore. Maybe you hate your job and you hate your life and you're constantly, yelling at your kids or yelling at your partner. It's these kinds of personal crises that we experience. When you're having a personal crisis, it's a good opportunity to reach out for help, even if you never experienced what you consider mental health issues before.
Now, do you think that prior to COVID that people just thought that this type of anxiety and stress was just kind of part of normal day-to-day life and that you were just supposed to accept it and just kind of tough it out, and that now there's more conversation and talk about that this isn't, you don't have to tolerate this as normal. There are ways out of this, and we start labeling it and then actually talking about it and then trying to get help and trying to improve the situation?
Oh, 100%. You are absolutely correct about that. Before it was, buck up, buttercup. You don't, you're sad, you're upset. Well, that's life. Well, yeah, that's life. But it doesn't mean that we can't reach out for help. It's like we have doctors to help our physical wounds. Why is it so terrible to reach out to a doctor to help you with your emotional wounds as well? It's just part of being healthy. It's part of wellness, is taking care of those things before they get worse. You notice a problem. Let's say you notice a cut on your arm. Well, you should treat it with antibiotic, or not antibiotic, but antibiotic cream maybe, and put a Band-Aid on it, make sure it doesn't get worse. It's the same thing with mental health issues that we come up with. You start to see yourself decline. There are resources out there to help you with that. And there should be no shame in that. And you're right. Before COVID, there was so much shame wrapped up around reaching out for help. There was so much shame. Well, if I'm depressed or if I'm anxious or if I have postpartum, well, there's something wrong with me, especially like postpartum. You think about new moms. Postpartum is something that affects such a great number of new moms. But guess what? You're not supposed to talk about it, because if you're depressed after you have your baby, well, there must be something wrong with you. Despite the fact that it is so common that, doctors have a checklist of postpartum depression issues that they ask new moms, right after the baby is born. Well, are you feeling depressed? Do you want to kill yourself? I mean, these but it's ridiculous, because there's still a stigma that, you can't say that something hurts inside, but I will say it is so much better today than it was before COVID, because as I mentioned, when COVID happened, we could not cope. The world as a whole could not cope with the overwhelming black hole of despair that was COVID, And so today there is much less stigma around reaching out for help. And that is, what a silver lining around COVID, that it really has allowed people the ability to reach out for help before things get really, really bad.
Now, can we switch gears a little and talk about your journey? Have you always kind of been involved in this kind of work?
No, I am actually an attorney. I'm not even a therapist. But I started this. I actually was a business attorney for a long time, and I started this company as basically as a hobby, as an after-school program for troubled kids in a little tiny community that I grew up in. And working with those kids, I realized that therapy was the linchpin in trying to improve their lives for the better moving forward. So these were kids who they were on free lunch. They lived with an aunt or maybe grandma. Their parents were on the streets on drugs. I had just seen there was this cycle of issues that these kids were dealing with, their families were dealing with, and they were a lot of it was untreated mental health issues. And so we came in, we started the after school program, we brought therapists in, and all of a sudden we were really able to change their lives in a way that was just unbelievable and spectacular to me. And that's when I realized, wow, like mental health is just so important in changing the world. So that's kind of how Insight started. Like I say, it was an after school program. And then we realized the importance of therapy and decided to focus on therapy so that we could make real change.
Now, when you started, it was in person, and now your business is primarily remote and virtual?
Yes, it was in person. And when COVID hit, we had this little office, it was a little old office, and the therapy was done in these little tiny airless offices. And many of my therapists were older. Some of them were medically fragile. I didn't feel like I could keep them safe. I didn't feel like I could keep my clients safe if we were doing therapy in person. So I said, okay, well, you know what? Let's go online. And I was so scared. I was convinced that was going to be the end of Insight. But lo and behold, within 3 months, our retention rates had gone up 10%. And my therapists were telling me that they never wanted to go back to the office because they loved it so much, working from home. So that was the beginning of really a huge expansion for us, because without the burden of having physical locations, we were able to get therapists licensed in many different states and start seeing clients in lots of different locations. So it was a pretty incredible thing for us.
And when that occurred, I'm hearing that the therapists were happy about the change, but were you noticing the clients were getting the same, if not better results?
Better results. So pretty immediately, we started seeing our retention rates go up. And what I mean by that is clients were sticking around for a longer period of time. And that's really important because therapy is like going to the gym. If you go one time, you're not going to go anywhere. It's the kind of thing where you've got to, we usually have a treatment plan, and treatment, depending on the client's diagnosis, will last. It should last anywhere from, let's say 2 or 3 months to 6 months. But in the office, we had a lot of people drop off after the first time or after, the second or third time. And we know that those people who drop off after the first, second, or third time are not getting anywhere. They didn't get effective treatment. And, they've got to stick around for a little bit longer in order to actually get real relief of their symptoms, whatever their symptoms are. So, like I said, we started seeing our retention rates go up, and client satisfaction went up. So when we were in the office, it was challenging for a lot of clients. We had a lot of Medicaid clients who had transportation issues, and when the weather was hot, if they were taking the bus, they couldn't make it, especially if they had medical issues. If they didn't have money for gas, it was really hard for them to come to their weekly appointments because they just didn't have the money for it. Let's say if they had a car accident, or if they had a flat tire, that session couldn't occur. Today, those barriers don't exist with telehealth. And it's really an incredible thing. And I just have to emphasize the changes that COVID brought about with the insurance companies. Previously, insurance companies would not reimburse for telehealth. If they did, they paid a lot less. They didn't like telehealth. And then COVID happened, and we realized we've got to get people help. Even if we think maybe it's not as good, we've got to get them help. And so the insurance companies relented, and they took away a lot of these barriers. And so, today, Medicaid will reimburse for a phone call. They'll reimburse for a video call. And while the majority of our sessions are video sessions, the ability to have just a telephone therapy session with somebody who is who has issues paying for internet, almost everybody has access to the phone. So it just opens the doors so wide to allow people to access mental health benefits. It's really an amazing thing that happened. So we saw tremendous benefit. We still see tremendous benefit to people being able to utilize telehealth. It's really an incredible thing.
It sounds like you also expanded your potential clients beyond the students in school. Now it's adults and it's businesses. You have more variety of clients nowadays.
We do. We do. We see clients of all ages. We see all insurances. And the wonderful thing is that we're able to access people who were not able to access services previously. So when we started in rural Nevada, and it was very challenging for me to get quality clinicians to go out to rural Nevada. So I had, my clinicians would drive an hour and a half, 2 hours a day to get to our physical location in order to see people in rural Nevada. We had an office in one tiny town, and in that town, while I did have licensed clinicians, I was not able to get on all of the insurance panels. So I was so upset because we had this one lady call in and she was desperate to come in and see us because the only therapist in town who accepted her insurance was her next door neighbor. And of course, she didn't want to be seen by her next door neighbor. So we tried desperately to get on that panel or to get like an exemption just for her, but the insurance, they wouldn't allow it. So that, and I still think about that today, that poor woman was never able to access therapy because of the strictures of time and place and the insurance company. But today, we would be able to see her because, now I have 50 clinicians that are credentialed with almost every insurance company, and we are no longer bound by geographical limitations. It's just such an amazing thing.
Now, can you share any insight from a business leadership standpoint when it comes to running now it's a fully remote company?
It is almost fully remote. We actually had to reopen a physical location in Las Vegas, basically to comply with the Nevada Board of Social Work, because we have interns. And they have certain rules for their interns. They want their interns to have some face-to-face time. That they call it face-to-face time. So we do have a small physical location, but none of our administrative functions come out of there. And it's really a very small part of our operation. But almost everything we do is remote. Yeah. So then you were saying what were
from a business leadership standpoint, what are some of the challenges and maybe learnings you've had in running a pretty much remote business? Because I would imagine just from keeping the team on the same page, you have communication challenges. There's, how do you develop that corporate culture without, being in the same building with people? Like some of those things could be challenges for a remote organization.
Absolutely. And, it's interesting because I've had both experiences. For the longest time, we had our physical location, but we were a lot smaller when we had our physical location. And we've grown exponentially since then. I mean, when we shut down our physical office, I think we had, fewer than 10 team members. And today we have almost 90. So it's a real big change for us. And, I think for us, the biggest challenge has been changing the way that we think about training people. So in the office, we would train people, we'd sit side by side and we would show them things on the computer or whatever. And it was we didn't have the same need for processes and procedures that we have today, that we are much larger and we are all remote. But there's a lot of pushback. I mean, you see it in the news, these companies that are asking their remote workers to come back to the office. And you have a lot of leaders who say, well, I can't monitor productivity. There's a lot that's lost when you're not in person. But from my perspective, that's not my reality, and that's not my perspective. What I have seen is that if you have the right policies and procedures in place, you can effectively run a remote company. One of the amazing things for us has been that we are no longer, because we're remote, because we can hire talent anywhere in the world, and we do, and we have team members in at least 10 different countries. We are able to access the best talent in all of the world. And, when I had my physical location, I was really limited to people who lived within like a 30-mile radius. And that was very, very limiting. But having the right policies and procedures in place, having, good onboarding that includes the right kind of training, it's really all about training, and it's about having the right productivity tools. So we actually do use employee monitoring software to make sure that people are working when they should be working, and being as productive as they can be. When you're in the office, you're able to see, okay, is this person coming in on time, and are they leaving at the right time? But one of the things that I always think about is, I used to work at big law firms, and I remember walking up and down the halls, and a lot of the people who were sitting there, they were sitting in their seats, they were in front of their computers, they were sitting there doing online shopping, they were playing solitaire, they were on Facebook, they were not working. So for us, we don't have those problems generally. And if we do, those people don't stick around very long. So I actually think that we're able to monitor what people do in a way that's much more efficient than what I used to see in the office. And then in terms of, you think about, what about FaceTime? How do you establish relationships? We use Google Workspace for one of my companies. Another one, we use Slack. But all day long, the people on the team are communicating with each other. So all day long, we have voices in our heads of our teammates. Like, we know what everybody is working on. We know what they're doing. We're constantly communicating. We also use Asana to keep track of the projects that everybody's working on. And so we get constant updates on, okay, well, where are we on this project? Where are we on that project? I think that remote work is just, it's so much more efficient than in person. I mean, so for me personally, I don't lose any time in the commute. I'm here in my home office. I am productive all day long. I don't have anybody coming into my office and, just, hey, how's your day going? And, hey, what did you do this weekend? And blah, 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 which I understand there's some value there. But when I was in the office, I would say 40% of my day, at least 40, 50, maybe even 60% of my day occasionally was taken up with those types of water cooler chats. I mean, I would close the door to my office and people would still come in and just hang out. And I am just so much more productive in my home office, where I can control who is coming in and who is coming out. I can pick up the phone to talk to somebody. I can do a Zoom call. I can do a Google Meet video call. Or I can just chat with them on the chat. I just think that I think remote work is so efficient. And when it's done, I think that when it's done well, it is so much better and so much more efficient than in-office work.
Now, how do you protect the Insight Therapy Solutions brand when, and I'm sure this was an issue in the law firms, right? Like, the relationship between the client and the lawyer is one thing. And then how do you kind of protect the relationship between the client and the brand, because that's slightly different because the firm wants to keep the clients, obviously, and then you're dependent on that individual who is dealing with them intimately, for the vast majority of the time together.
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, we have, so the way that we do business, it's not just the therapist that has the touch point with the client, because we are insurance based. And more than that, we have an excellent front desk that is constantly in contact with clients to make sure that they're happy with our services, just to check in and see how things are going. Our billing department is constantly in contact with clients to make sure that they understand their insurance benefits. So we have a lot of touch points with clients, but to be honest with you, I encourage the therapist to have that close personal relationship with clients, because that is how good therapy happens. 70% of the efficacy of therapy is related to the relationship between the client and the therapist. And number one, most important for me, is that clients get good therapy and they have a good experience. So I understand what you're saying about protecting the brand, but I guess from my perspective, what's more important is that people get good quality service. And I expect that they're going to establish that close personal relationship with their therapist. And, at the end of the day, clients are free, and they should be free to choose the provider of their choice. So, if a clinician leaves, sometimes the clients will go with them, but sometimes they'll stay with us because we provide good value and good service at every single touch point. So I guess what I'm saying is it's more important to me that the clients actually get something of value. And that is necessarily going to include that close personal relationship with their therapist. And I wouldn't want to interfere with that.
And one of the things that you do that I believe is kind of unique and special and is more value to your client is this complimentary therapist matchmaking service. Can you talk a little about that?
Yes. So that's something I think very different from what other clinics do. Basically, other clinics, if you call into a clinic and you say, hey, I'd like to see a therapist, they're probably just going to put you with anybody that has an opening. And that is not the right way to do it. Our therapist matchmaking services, what it is when you call in and you say, hey, I'd really like to see a therapist, our matchmakers get to know you. They get to know the issues that you're dealing with and a little bit about your personality. Because as I mentioned, 70% of the efficacy of therapy is related to the relationship between the client and the therapist. So every single client needs to be placed with the right match for them. And what that means is, from a personality perspective, so, of course, the clinician needs to specialize in whatever the issues are, right? Like if it's depression or anxiety or couples or whatever. And they need to accept the insurance. That's important too. But also, what is very important is the therapist's personality and their style. So some clients might need a softer touch. They might need somebody who's warm and fuzzy, somebody who's going to be, like a warm blanket. Other clients may need somebody who's going to be very firm with them, who's going to call them out on stuff. And those are the types of things that make for an effective therapeutic relationship down the road. And those are the things that we train our matchmakers to listen for when they are speaking to a new client. Is the new client soft-spoken? Do they seem a little hesitant? Do they seem angry? Do they seem like they would walk all over a softer spoken therapist? And so that's something very special that I haven't seen any other clinic out there do. And I'm very proud of that. And I think that also speaks to our retention rates. So 85% of our clients come back after the first time, and that's a big deal. With other clinics, you see 25 to 50% of clients don't come back after the first time. So I think it really speaks to the effectiveness of our matchmaking program.
Can you share why it was important for you to become part of WBE West?
Yes. So it's, how do I want to put this? As a professional woman, I've had a hard time, just like most professional women do. And, as a woman, when you walk in a room, you don't have the same effect that men do. Even as a professional woman, as a lawyer, I found this all the time. I was a litigator, and I was a very aggressive litigator. And it always surprised me when I would walk into a room. I would sometimes have to be more aggressive than men because, because I looked like a cute little woman, and so it's very difficult for women in the workplace. It's very difficult for women in the professional world. And I've always tried to do business with other female professionals, and I've tried to do business with women-owned businesses. And when this opportunity was presented to me, I thought, wow, that seems like exactly the kind of place that I should be a part of, because I want to meet other women business owners. I want to meet other people who have had the same struggles that I have had and that understand where I'm coming from.
So what do you need more of? How can we help you?
Well, that is such a great question. I would just love to have more connections with. I'll be honest, we really have not utilized this resource the way that we should have. And part of it is, we've been pulled in lots of different directions. I've learned some things, but I still find it to be a very complicated world. And so really, I think I'd like some additional support in figuring out the resources that are available through this organization.
And if somebody wants to learn more about Insight, what is the website? What's the best way to connect with you?
Franchesca at insighttherapy.us. Our website is www.insighttherapysolutions.com. And we're always looking for people to partner with, for people to collaborate with, and put more good out into the world.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story today. You're doing such important work, and we appreciate you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that you had me today. Thank you.
All right, this is Lee Kantor. We'll see you all next time on Women in Motion.